They arrested her in front of everyone. Handcuffs, cameras, headlines calling her a fraud. The same people who praised her stood back and watched her fall. Some even smiled. But what they didn't know was that the woman they just destroyed had already recorded everything. Every secret meeting, every stolen dollar, every betrayal. And the moment they thought they had won was the exact moment everything they built started to collapse. Welcome back to the channel, where we bring you powerful stories of karma, justice, and unforgettable revenge. If you enjoy stories where the truth always finds its way back, and those who do wrong finally face the consequences, then you're in the right place. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video with someone who loves a good justice story. Because the story you're about to hear will make you question everything about power, trust, and what really happens behind closed doors. Brookhaven was the kind of town where people didn't lock their doors, not because they didn't have to, but because they believed nothing bad could happen there. Everything about it felt intentional. The neatly trimmed hedges, the polished storefront windows, the quiet pride in the way people greeted each other like they had known each other forever. And at the center of that carefully built image was the Brookhaven Community Foundation, a place people trusted, a place people believed in, and more importantly, a place people never questioned. Amara Cole fit perfectly into that world. If you asked anyone in Brookhaven who she was, you would hear the same words repeated over and over again. Reliable, brilliant, kind. She's the reason this foundation works. She never raised her voice, never missed a deadline, never made a mistake anyone could remember. And yet, she never tried to stand out. That was what made people trust her even more. Morning, Amara. Good morning, David. You're in early again. I could say the same about you. David laughed lightly as he poured himself coffee. Yeah, well, I'm trying to keep up with you. Amara smiled politely, setting her bag down beside her desk. You don't need to keep up with me, she said calmly. Just don't fall behind your numbers. See, David shook his head. That's exactly what I mean. You make it sound easy. It always looked easy, but that was because no one saw the hours behind it. No one saw the nights she stayed late, reviewing reports long after the building had emptied. No one saw the way she double-checked everything, not because she didn't trust the system, but because she trusted herself more. Numbers made sense to her. They followed rules. They told stories. And if you listened carefully enough, they told the truth. That morning started like any other. Emails, reports, meetings scheduled down to the minute. Marcus walked over to her desk, holding a file a little too tightly. Hey, do you have a second? Amara looked up. Of course. What's going on? I just finished the emergency housing allocation, he said, placing the file in front of her. But something about it feels off. I can't explain it. Amara raised an eyebrow slightly. Off how? I don't know, Marcus admitted. Everything adds up. The totals match. The approvals are there. It just doesn't feel right. Amara flipped open the file. Her eyes moved quickly at first. Efficient, confident, then slower, then still. Who approved this? She asked quietly. Operations, Marcus replied. Lena signed off on it this morning. And the recipients? Marcus hesitated. They're not listed in detail. Amara looked up at him. Not listed at all. There's a category, Marcus said. Emergency allocation. That's it. Amara closed the file gently. Send me the digital version, she said. Sure, but... And Marcus? Yeah. Don't flag this to anyone else yet. Marcus frowned slightly. Why? Amara held his gaze for a brief moment before answering. Because I want to understand it first. He nodded slowly. Okay. As Marcus walked away, Amara leaned back in her chair, her fingers resting lightly on the edge of the file. It wasn't wrong. That was the problem. Everything looked correct. Everything balanced. Everything had the right approvals. And yet, something didn't sit right. That feeling stayed with her through the morning, through the emails, through the meetings, through the routine conversations that usually passed without thought. By the time she walked into the executive meeting later that day, she had already made a decision. She was going to ask, not accuse, not confront, just ask. Victor Hale was already seated at the head of the table, his presence filling the room without effort. "Amara," he said with a welcoming smile. Perfect timing. Lena sat to his right, reviewing something on her tablet. Daniel sat quietly on the other side, watching more than speaking, as usual. "Let's get started," Victor said. "We have donors arriving this weekend, and I want everything aligned." The meeting moved quickly at first. Updates, projections, confident statements delivered with certainty. Then Amara spoke. "I reviewed the latest allocation reports," she said calmly, placing a document on the table. "And I noticed something I'd like clarification on." Victor leaned forward slightly. "Go ahead." "There are funds being transferred between internal accounts before being categorized," she continued. "The timing of those transfers doesn't align with our standard reporting structure." Lena didn't look up immediately. When she did, her expression didn't change. "That's standard," Lena said. "Liquidity adjustments." Amara nodded slightly. "I considered that," she replied. "But the timing gaps are inconsistent. Some funds remain unaccounted for longer than expected." A brief silence settled over the room. Victor smiled, not dismissively, but comfortably. "Amara," he said, "you're incredibly thorough. That's one of your greatest strengths." A few people nodded around the table. "But sometimes," Victor continued, "when you look too closely at numbers, you start seeing patterns that aren't actually problems." A soft chuckle came from someone at the far end of the table. Amara didn't smile. "I don't think this is one of those times," she said quietly. That shifted the room. Just slightly, but enough. Lena set her tablet down. "It's already been reviewed," she said. "There's nothing irregular about it." Daniel finally spoke. "If there was a concern," he said calmly, "it would have been escalated." Another silence. Amara looked at each of them. Victor, calm, confident. Lena, controlled, unmoved. Daniel, observing. None of them explained anything. "Understood," Amara said finally. And just like that, the meeting moved on. But something had changed. Not in the room. In her. Because now she knew. It wasn't just the numbers. It was the reaction. Too quick. Too rehearsed. Too certain, without explanation. Later that evening, long after most of the staff had left, Amara sat alone in her office. The building was quiet. The kind of quiet that made every small sound feel louder. She opened the reports again, pulled up the transaction logs, cross-referenced dates, accounts, approvals. At first, it was just curiosity. Then it became something else. "Okay," she whispered softly to herself. "Let's see what you're hiding." Her fingers moved faster across the keyboard now, pulling older data, comparing patterns, looking not just at what was there, but what wasn't. Minutes turned into hours. And then she saw it. A pattern. Not obvious. Not careless. But consistent. Funds moved in small amounts. Spread across multiple accounts. Hidden within legitimate transactions. She leaned closer to the screen. Her eyes narrowing. "No," she whispered. She ran the numbers again. Same result. Again. Same result. Her heart began to beat a little faster. Not out of panic. Out of realization. "This isn't an error," she said quietly. She scrolled further, deeper, and then she stopped. At the bottom of the compiled report was a total, a number so large. It didn't belong in a system like this. Millions. Unaccounted for. Amara sat back slowly. The room suddenly felt colder. Heavier. This can't be right. But it was. Because numbers didn't lie. And if the numbers were telling the truth, then everything else wasn't. She closed her laptop gently. Not in panic. Not in fear. But in understanding. Because in that moment, Amara Cole realized something that would change everything. She wasn't looking at a mistake. She was looking at a system. And systems like that don't exist by accident. They are built, protected, and most importantly, hidden. She looked out across the empty office. At the desks, the walls, the doors behind which decisions were made. For the first time since she started working there, she didn't feel like she belonged. She felt like she had just stepped into something she was never meant to see. And deep down, she knew one thing for certain. If this was real, then the people behind it would do anything to keep it that way. Amara didn't move, didn't speak, didn't react. But in that silence, A decision was made. She wasn't going to ignore it. She wasn't going to walk away. And she definitely wasn't going to ask permission. Because the truth had already started revealing itself. And she was going to follow it, no matter where it led. The next morning, nothing looked different. That was the most unsettling part. The same polished floors. The same quiet hum of computers. The same familiar voices echoing softly through the office. If there was something wrong, it was hidden perfectly. Morning, Amara. Morning. You look tired. Late night. Amara glanced up briefly from her desk, just catching up on reports. David leaned against the edge of her cubicle. You ever not work? She allowed herself a faint smile. I sleep sometimes. He laughed, but Amara had already looked back down at her screen. Because today, she wasn't here to work. She was here to watch. That was the shift. Subtle, invisible, but complete. Yesterday, she had been part of the system. Today she was studying it. Her computer screen looked normal to anyone passing by. Spreadsheets, reports, routine. But behind those tabs, she was building something else. A timeline. Every transaction she had flagged the night before, she began mapping out. Dates, amounts, approvals, movement between accounts. At first, it looked scattered, random, unconnected. But then slowly, lines began to form. Come on, she murmured under her breath, eyes scanning rapidly. Show me what you're doing. And then she saw it again. Not just a pattern in numbers, a pattern in timing. Transfers didn't happen randomly. They happened in clusters. Late afternoons, end of reporting cycles, right before internal audits. Strategic, she whispered. That word sat with her, because mistakes weren't strategic. But this was Amara. She looked up. Marcus stood there again, holding his tablet. You got a minute? Always, she said. He pulled a chair closer. I sent you the digital file yesterday. Did you get a chance to look at it? I did. And Amara paused, not because she didn't have an answer, but because she was deciding how much to say. What do you think is off? She asked instead. Marcus frowned slightly. I don't know. It just feels like we're approving things without knowing where they're going. Amara nodded slowly. And has that ever happened before? Marcus hesitated. Not that I've noticed. Or not that you were told to notice? She asked gently. That made him pause longer. I just follow the process, he said. Exactly, Amara replied. There was no accusation in her voice. But the meaning landed. Marcus shifted slightly in his seat. You think something's wrong? Amara looked at him. Really looked at him. Young. Honest. Still untouched by whatever this was. I think, she said carefully, that sometimes things can be wrong without looking wrong. Marcus didn't respond immediately. So what do we do? He asked. Amara leaned back slightly. For now. She closed the file on her screen. We pay attention. Marcus nodded, but there was uncertainty in his eyes. As he walked away, Amara watched him for a moment. Then she turned back to her screen. Pay attention, she repeated softly, because that was exactly what she intended to do. Not confront. Not expose. Not yet. First, she needed to understand the full picture. And that meant going deeper. That afternoon, Amara did something no one noticed, which made it even more powerful. She volunteered. I can take the partnership reconciliation this week, she said casually during a team check-in. Lena glanced at her briefly. That's already assigned. I know, Amara replied calmly. But I've been reviewing some inconsistencies in that area. It would help to have a complete view. A pause. Victor looked between them, then smiled. Efficiency, he said. I like it. Lena didn't smile, but she nodded once. Fine. You can assist. Assist. That word mattered, because it meant access. And access was everything. That evening, Amara stayed late again. But this time not alone. From across the room, she could hear quiet voices. Victor's office. The door wasn't fully closed. Amara didn't move at first. She kept typing, kept her posture relaxed. But her attention shifted. We need to tighten the approvals. Victor's voice. Calm. Controlled. They're already tight, Lena replied. Not enough, Victor said. She noticed. Amara's fingers paused over the keyboard. A silence followed. Then Lena spoke again. She asked a question. That's not the same as knowing. Questions lead to knowing, Victor replied. Another pause. What do you want to do? Lena asked. Victor exhaled slowly. Nothing yet. That word echoed in Amara's mind. Yet. We adjust, he continued. Reduce exposure. Limit visibility. And her? Lena asked. Another pause. Longer this time. Keep her close, Victor said finally. The closer she is, the easier it is to see what she's doing. Amara felt something shift inside her. Not fear. Clarity. Because now she understood something critical. They were aware. Not of everything. But enough. And that meant this wasn't just about uncovering the truth anymore. It was about staying ahead of it. Amara slowly resumed typing. Calm. Steady. As if she hadn't heard a thing. But inside, everything had changed. Later that night, as she reviewed the expanded data sets, something else began to emerge. Names. Not internal accounts. Not departments. People. External entities receiving funds. She clicked into one. Then another. Then another. No public records. No clear connections. Who are you? She whispered. Her screen reflected in her eyes as she leaned closer. Because now, this wasn't just about missing money. This was about where it was going. And more importantly, who it was going to. She leaned back slowly, her mind racing through possibilities. Fraud? No. Too organized. Embezzlement? No. Too distributed. Something else. Something bigger. Something intentional. Amara looked around the empty office. The same office that had once felt safe. Predictable. Now it felt like a stage. And everyone inside it was playing a role, including her. But the difference was, she was the only one who knew. The script was breaking. She closed her laptop slowly. Not because she was done, but because she had seen enough. For now, because the truth wasn't something you rushed. It was something you uncovered, piece by piece. And the deeper she went, the more dangerous it became. But one thing was certain now. They were watching her. And she was watching them right back. And somewhere between those two things, a collision was coming. One that neither side would be able to walk away from. Something had changed. Not visibly. Not in a way anyone could point to. But once you noticed it, you couldn't ignore it. Amara felt it the moment she walked into the office that morning. Conversations stopped a second too early. Eyes lingered a second too long. And the usual ease was gone. Morning, she said, placing her bag on her desk. Morning, David replied. But his tone was different. Slightly hesitant. Amara didn't react. She simply logged into her system. Access denied. She blinked once. Then tried again. Access restricted. Contact administrator. Her expression didn't change. But her mind sharpened instantly. Marcus, she called calmly. He rolled his chair over. Yeah. Can you access the partnership reconciliation folder? He turned to his screen, clicked a few times. Yeah, I can. Amara nodded slowly. Good. Marcus frowned slightly. Why? You can't. She met his eyes briefly. Apparently not. That was confirmation. Not a system error. Not a glitch. A decision. Maybe IT changed permissions? Marcus offered. Maybe, Amara said. But they both knew. That wasn't it. She stood up. I'll sort it out. As she walked toward the executive offices, her steps were steady. Measured. Not rushed. Not hesitant. Because this moment mattered. She knocked once. Come in, Lena's voice called from inside. Lena Strauss was seated behind her desk, tablet in hand, posture perfect as always. She didn't look surprised to see Amara. Something I can help you with? Lena asked calmly. Amara stepped inside. Yes. My access to the partnership accounts has been restricted. Lena didn't respond immediately. She tapped something on her tablet, then looked up. Yes, she said. We made some adjustments. We? Amara asked. Leadership, Lena replied. Amara held her gaze. Based on what? Lena's expression didn't shift. Operational necessity. That's vague, Amara said. Insufficient, Lena replied. A pause. Amara stepped slightly closer to the desk. I was assigned to assist with those accounts. You were assisting, Lena corrected. That's no longer required. Why? This time, Lena leaned back slightly. Studying her. You've been asking a lot of questions lately, Amara. Questions are part of my job. Not all questions, Lena said quietly. Are productive. Another silence. Amara didn't break eye contact. Are you saying I shouldn't be asking them? Lena's lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile. I'm saying, she replied, you should focus on the areas you're responsible for. And if those areas overlap with something that doesn't make sense, then you trust the process. That word again. Process. Amara let out a slow breath. I do trust the process, she said, which is exactly why I know something is wrong. That landed. Not loudly, but enough. For a brief moment, Lena's expression shifted. Then it was gone. You're overstepping, Lena said. And you're avoiding the question, Amara replied. Silence. Longer this time. Heavier. Then Lena leaned forward slightly. Be careful, Amara. The words were soft, controlled, but there was something underneath them. Not concern. A warning. Amara straightened. I always am, she said. And without another word, she turned and walked out. The hallway felt different now. Not quieter. Sharper. Because this wasn't subtle anymore. They weren't just watching her. They were pushing back. By midday, the isolation became clearer. Emails she sent went unanswered. Meetings she should have been in happened without her. Files she used daily were suddenly unavailable. David walked past her desk, stopped, then kept walking. Marcus looked like he wanted to say something, but didn't. The message was clear. She was being cut off, piece by piece. Okay, she whispered to herself, staring at her screen. So that's how you want to play it. She leaned back in her chair, because if they were closing doors, she would find another way in. That evening, Amara didn't stay late in her office. She left. At least, that's what it looked like. 10 minutes later, she walked back in through the side entrance. Quiet. Unnoticed. Because there was one thing she had learned early in her career. Systems didn't just exist in software. They existed in buildings, in habits, in routines. And most systems had blind spots. The records room was one of them. Old files, printed logs, archived data that hadn't been digitized fully. No one paid attention to it anymore, which made it perfect. Amara flipped on the dim light. Dust particles floated in the air as she moved deeper into the room. Let's see what you missed, she murmured. She began pulling files, year by year, quarter by quarter, not looking for everything, just one thing, consistency. And then she found it. A ledger. Old. Hand-reviewed. Signed. She flipped through it slowly. And there it was. The same pattern, but clearer. Because older systems weren't as polished. Transfers logged manually. Annotations scribbled in margins. Corrections crossed out, then rewritten. Less perfect. More honest. Amara's heart began to beat faster. Got you. She turned another page. And froze. There was a name. Not a company. Not an account. A person. Victor Hale. Her eyes scanned the page. Authorization signature. Transfer approval. External routing. Her breath caught. No. She flipped another page. Another name. Lena Strauss. Another. Daniel Reeves. The same 3 names. Over and over again. Approving. Routing. Controlling. This wasn't just happening around them. They were at the center of it. Amara slowly closed the ledger. Her hands steady, but her mind racing. Because now, there was no doubt. No uncertainty. No possibility of mistake. This wasn't a broken system. It was a designed one. And the people she reported to were the ones running it. She stood there in the dim light. And for the first time, she felt it. Not fear. Not hesitation. Something else. Resolve. Because now, this wasn't just about finding the truth. It was about what she was going to do with it. And deep down, she already knew. They thought restricting her access would slow her down. They thought isolating her would make her step back. They thought warning her would make her careful. But what they didn't realize was they had just made a mistake. Because the moment they pushed her out of the system was the moment she stopped playing by their rules. And now, Amara Cole wasn't just investigating anymore. She was building something. Something they couldn't see. Something they couldn't control. And when it was ready, it wouldn't just expose them. It would destroy them. By the time the next week began, Amara Cole had stopped pretending things were normal. Because they weren't. And the people around her weren't pretending anymore either. It started with silence. Not the quiet of an empty room, but the kind of silence that follows you. Hey, a voice began behind her, then stopped. Amara turned slightly. Two employees standing near the printer. One of them quickly looked away. The other forced a smile. "Morning, Amara," she said. "Morning," Amara replied. But the tone was different. Careful, measured, like someone trying not to say the wrong thing. Amara walked past them without slowing. She didn't need confirmation. She could feel it. They had said something, or heard something, and whatever it was, it involved her. At her desk, her screen flickered for a moment before loading. New notification. System update. Activity monitoring enabled. Her eyes narrowed slightly. She clicked it. Access logs. User tracking. Session recording enabled. Amara leaned back slowly. "Of course," she whispered. They weren't just restricting her anymore. They were watching her. Every click. Every file. Every movement. Amara. She looked up. Victor Hale stood at the entrance of her cubicle. "Do you have a moment?" he asked, his voice smooth as ever. "Of course," she replied. He gestured toward his office. "Walk with me." The walk was short, but it felt longer, because Victor didn't speak, and neither did she. Inside his office, the door closed softly behind them. Victor moved to his desk, but didn't sit immediately. Instead, he turned slightly, studying her. "You've been busy," he said. Amara didn't react. "I've been working," she replied. Victor smiled faintly. "Yes, I've noticed." A pause. Then he stepped closer. "You know," he continued, "people like you are very valuable." "People like me?" Amara asked. "Careful," Victor said. "Precise. Committed to doing things the right way. That's the expectation, isn't it?" "It is," Victor replied. "Until it isn't." That hung in the air. Amara held his gaze. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean." Victor nodded slowly. "I think you do." Another pause. Then he walked around the desk and sat down. "You've been reviewing areas outside your assigned scope," he said. "I was asked to assist." "Assist," Victor repeated. "Yes." He leaned back slightly. "And what exactly did you find while assisting?" The question was calm. Too calm. Amara knew this moment mattered. Every word. Every pause. "I found inconsistencies," she said. Victor nodded. "Inconsistencies," he repeated. "Yes." "And what do you plan to do with those inconsistencies?" Another pause. Amara didn't rush. "I plan to understand them." Victor smiled again. "That's a very safe answer." "I prefer accurate answers," she replied. He chuckled softly. "I'm sure you do." Then his expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough. "But let me give you some advice, Amara." His voice lowered slightly. "Not everything that looks like a problem is yours to solve." There it was. Not a warning. Not exactly, but close. Amara tilted her head slightly. "And if it affects the work I'm responsible for?" Victor leaned forward. "Then you trust leadership to handle it." "Leadership," Amara repeated. "Yes." Their eyes locked. Because now, there was no confusion. No ambiguity. This wasn't a conversation. It was a line. And Victor had just drawn it. Amara stood. "I understand," she said. Victor nodded. "I'm glad." As she walked out of his office, her heartbeat remained steady. But her thoughts were anything but. "They're tightening control," she murmured under her breath. "And they're testing you." Another voice answered. She stopped. That wasn't her voice. "Relax," Marcus said quietly, stepping out from the corner of the hallway. Amara looked at him. "You shouldn't be standing there," she said. "I wasn't listening," he replied quickly, then hesitated. "Okay, maybe I was." Amara exhaled slowly. "You need to be careful," Marcus said. "So do you," she replied. He shook his head. "No, I mean it. Something's going on." Amara studied him. "You're just realizing that." Marcus frowned. "No, I mean, people are talking." "What are they saying?" He glanced around before lowering his voice. "That you're digging into things you shouldn't be." A pause. "That you're causing problems." Amara let out a soft breath. "Of course they are." And Marcus hesitated. "And what?" "That leadership is watching you." Amara almost smiled. "They should be," she said. Marcus stared at her. "You're not worried?" Amara's expression didn't change. "No," she said. But that wasn't entirely true. She wasn't afraid. But she was aware, and awareness was more dangerous than fear. That night, Amara didn't go home. Not immediately. Instead, she sat in her car across the street from the building, watching the lights, the movement, the patterns, because systems didn't just exist in data. They existed in behavior, and behavior repeated itself. At 8:12 p.m., Lena left. At 8:27 p.m., Daniel followed. At 9:03 p.m., Victor's office light turned off. But he didn't leave. Amara's eyes narrowed. "Why are you still inside?" she whispered. She waited. 9:10, 9:15, 9:20. Then, the side entrance opened. Victor stepped out. Alone. No briefcase. No phone in hand. Just walking. Amara's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Because this was new, unexpected, and in a system like this, unexpected things mattered. She started the engine. Slowly, carefully, and followed him. At a distance. Because whatever Victor Hale was doing, it wasn't part of the foundation. And for the first time, Amara wasn't just uncovering what was happening inside the system. She was stepping outside of it, into something far bigger, and far more dangerous. Because the deeper she went, the clearer it became. This wasn't just corruption. It was connection, power, control, and something hidden, far beyond the walls of Brookhaven. And now, Amara Cole had crossed a line. Not the one Victor drew, but a different one. The kind you can't step back from. Because from this moment on, she wasn't just investigating anymore. She was becoming a threat. The car ahead of her didn't move like someone going home. That was the first thing Amara noticed. Victor Hale drove with purpose. Not rushed. Not cautious. Just certain. Amara kept her distance. 2 cars behind. Far enough not to be noticed. Close enough not to lose him. "Where are you going?" she whispered under her breath. Brookhaven slowly faded behind them. The neat streets gave way to darker, quieter roads. Fewer streetlights. Fewer houses. More space. This wasn't a part of town people talked about. Victor turned once. Then again. Then pulled into a narrow, unmarked driveway. Amara drove past it. Slowly. Her eyes scanned quickly. A building. Old. Industrial. No signage. No lights except one faint glow near the back. She continued driving for another block before turning around. Her heart was steady, but her instincts were loud. "This isn't random," she murmured. She parked further down the road, far enough to stay hidden. Then she waited. Minutes passed. Nothing. No movement. No sound. Just silence. Amara stepped out of the car. The air felt colder here. Heavier. She moved slowly toward the building. Each step deliberate. Measured. The closer she got, the clearer it became. This place wasn't abandoned. It was unused. There was a difference. Unused meant someone still needed it. She reached the side of the building. The faint light she saw earlier was coming from a small window. Amara hesitated. This was another line. Another step forward. And just like before, she knew there was no going back. She moved closer. Carefully. Quietly. And looked inside. Victor wasn't alone. 2 other men stood with him. One older. Sharp suit. Controlled posture. The kind of presence that didn't need introduction. The other younger. Restless. Watching everything. "The transfers are clean," Victor was saying. Amara's breath slowed. She leaned slightly closer. "No irregular flags?" the older man asked. "None that matter," Victor replied. That phrase landed. None that matter. Amara's jaw tightened slightly. "And the foundation?" the younger man asked. Victor smiled. "Untouchable." The word echoed. "Untouchable." "And the director?" the older man asked. A pause. Victor's expression didn't change. "She's curious," he said. Amara felt her pulse rise. "But manageable. Make sure she stays that way," the older man replied. Victor nodded. "She will." Amara stepped back slowly, her mind racing. This wasn't just internal corruption. This was external, organized, connected, and far bigger than she thought. She turned quietly and froze. A sound behind her. Footsteps. Close. Too close. Lost. The voice was calm, but sharp. Amara turned. The younger man from inside stood a few feet away, watching her. Not surprised. Not confused. Just aware. Amara's expression didn't change. I could ask you the same thing, she said. The man tilted his head slightly. This isn't a place people just walk into. Then maybe you should ask yourself why I'm here, she replied. A pause. He studied her, then smiled slightly. Bold, he said. Amara didn't respond. Because she wasn't here to impress him. She was here to survive the moment. You work with Victor, he said. Not a question. Amara held his gaze. Yes. And you followed him. Again, not a question. Silence. Because denying it would be pointless. The man took a step closer. Not aggressive. Just enough. You're either very brave, he said quietly, or very stupid. Amara's voice didn't shake. I'm neither. Another pause. Then he smiled again. I believe that, he said. From inside the building, Victor's voice called out. Everything all right? The man didn't look away from Amara. Perfectly fine, he replied. Then, after a moment, he stepped aside, giving her space. A choice. Go home, he said quietly. Amara didn't move immediately. Tonight, he added, you didn't see anything. Their eyes locked. Because both of them knew. That wasn't true. But after a moment, Amara turned, walked back to her car, got in, and drove. She didn't look back. Not once. But her mind was already moving ahead. By the time she got home, she wasn't thinking about fear. She wasn't thinking about danger. She was thinking about structure. Because now, she had something new. Not just evidence. Context. This wasn't a small operation. It was a network. And Victor was just one part of it. Amara sat at her kitchen table. Laptop open. Lights dim. She began mapping everything again. But this time, she added new nodes. New connections. New possibilities. All right, she whispered. Let's see how deep this goes. Because now, she wasn't chasing a problem anymore. She was uncovering a system. And systems like this didn't collapse easily. They had layers. Protection. People willing to defend them. Which meant, if she wanted to bring it down, she needed more than evidence. She needed leverage. And for the first time, Amara Cole smiled. Because now, the game had changed. And she was no longer reacting. She was planning. And when she made her move, it wouldn't just expose them. It would dismantle everything they thought was untouchable. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Not because Amara was afraid, but because her mind wouldn't stop working. Every word she had heard, every face she had seen, every decision she had made, it all replayed, over and over again. Untouchable. Victor's voice echoed in her head. She stared at the ceiling in the darkness. Nothing is untouchable, she whispered. By morning, Amara was no longer reacting to the situation. She was designing something. A response. Because now she understood the truth. You don't destroy a system like this from the outside. You let it expose itself. When she walked into the office, she looked exactly the same. Calm. Focused. Controlled. But inside, everything had shifted. Morning, Marcus said cautiously. Morning, she replied. He hesitated. You okay? Amara paused for just a second, then nodded. I will be. That answer stayed with him. Because it wasn't reassurance. It was a promise. Amara sat down at her desk and logged in. This time, no restricted access message. Her system opened normally. She didn't react outwardly. But inside, she understood immediately. They're watching behavior now, she thought. Yesterday, they restricted her. Today, they gave access back. Not out of trust. Out of strategy. Let's see what you do, she murmured softly. Because now, they weren't blocking her anymore. They were studying her. And that gave her something powerful. Control over perception. Amara opened files slowly. Clicked deliberately. Paused often. Not randomly. Carefully. She was creating a pattern. A false one. She pulled harmless reports. Reviewed neutral accounts. Spent time on files that meant nothing. Because if they were watching her, then she would give them something to see. Meanwhile, she built everything else somewhere they couldn't. At lunch, Marcus sat across from her. You've been quiet, he said. Have I, she replied. Yeah, more than usual. Amara stirred her coffee slowly. Tell me something, Marcus, she said. He looked up. If you found something that didn't make sense. Okay. And the people in charge told you not to question it. Yeah? What would you do? Marcus hesitated. That depends, he said. On what? How big it is? Amara nodded. And if it was big? Marcus leaned back slightly. Then I'd probably stay out of it. A small pause. Why? She asked. He gave a small, nervous laugh. Because people don't ignore big problems unless they have a reason. And what kind of reason would that be? Amara asked. Marcus met her eyes. The kind that makes it dangerous to ask questions. That answer lingered between them. Because it wasn't wrong. Amara leaned forward slightly. What if not asking questions is the dangerous part? Marcus didn't respond immediately. I think, he said slowly, you already know what you're going to do. Amara smiled faintly. Yes, she said. I do. That evening, she didn't follow anyone. She didn't search files. She didn't dig deeper. Instead, she prepared. At home, her laptop sat open, but not connected to anything inside the foundation. Separate, isolated, safe. She began organizing everything. The patterns, the transactions, the names, the connections. Victor, Lena, Daniel, and now, unknown external players. This isn't enough, she said quietly. Because it wasn't. What she had was truth. But truth alone wasn't power. Power came from timing, from proof, from impact. She needed something undeniable, something they couldn't explain away, something they couldn't control. And then, an idea formed. Amara leaned back slowly. No, she whispered. Then again, yes. Because the system had one weakness. Just one. It depended on trust. Donors. Public image. Reputation. If that broke, everything broke. And the biggest event of the year was coming. The Foundation Gala. Hundreds of guests. Media coverage. Live presentations. Victor at the center of it all. Amara's eyes sharpened. That's where it ends, she said softly. Because if she exposed them there, in front of everyone, they wouldn't be able to hide. They wouldn't be able to control the narrative. They wouldn't be able to silence it. But for that to work, she needed one thing. Proof that connected everything. Not just numbers. Not just names. Something real. Something visible. Something that would force the truth into the open. The next day, Amara walked into the office with a different kind of calm. Not the calm of someone who was careful, but the calm of someone who had decided. Victor passed her in the hallway. Good morning, Amara. Good morning, she replied. He paused slightly, studying her. You seem focused today. Amara met his gaze. I am. A brief pause. Then Victor smiled. I'm glad. But something in his eyes suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. And he shouldn't have been. Because while he thought he was watching her, he had no idea. She had already set the stage. And everything he did from this moment forward was part of her plan. That night, Amara sat alone once again. But this time, she wasn't searching. She was waiting. Because traps don't work unless someone walks into them. And Victor Hale was about to do exactly that, without even realizing it. Because the most dangerous thing about control is believing you still have it. And soon, that belief was going to destroy him. By the time the gala week arrived, Brookhaven was glowing. Banners hung across the streets. Local businesses displayed foundation posters in their windows. News crews began setting up early coverage. To the outside world, this was celebration. But inside the foundation, it felt like pressure. Not visible, not spoken, but present. Amara felt it the moment she stepped into the building. Everything ready for tonight? Someone asked across the office. Of course. It always is. Laughter followed. But it didn't reach her. Because she wasn't looking at the decorations. She was watching people. Victor moved through the office like he owned it. Confident. Relaxed. In control. Lena followed closely behind, tablet in hand, reviewing final preparations. Daniel stood near the back, speaking quietly into his phone. They looked exactly the same. But they weren't. Because pressure reveals things control tries to hide. Amara. She turned. Victor stood a few feet away. I'd like you to review the final financial summary before tonight's presentation, he said. Amara nodded. Of course. He handed her a file. Physical, not digital. That alone was unusual. As she opened it, her eyes moved quickly across the pages. Everything was clean. Too clean. Perfect numbers. Perfect alignment. Perfect reporting. Victor watched her closely. Well, he asked. Amara closed the file slowly. It's impressive, she said. Victor smiled. I thought you'd appreciate that. A pause. Then Amara tilted her head slightly. There's just one thing, she said. Victor's smile didn't fade. What is it? Amara tapped lightly on the page. These adjustments. Yes. They weren't in the system yesterday. A brief silence. Almost invisible. Victor leaned slightly closer. Last-minute refinements, he said. Of course, Amara replied. Their eyes locked. Because both of them knew. That wasn't the truth. Victor straightened. Everything needs to be perfect tonight, he said. Amara nodded. It will be. But her tone held something else. Something Victor noticed, but couldn't quite define. As he walked away, Amara looked back down at the file. Refinements, she whispered. Then quietly. Or corrections. Because what he had just handed her wasn't preparation. It was damage control. And that meant one thing. They were adjusting. Reacting. Which meant her pressure was working. Later that afternoon, Amara found Marcus in the records room. You're hiding now? She asked lightly. Marcus looked up. I could ask you the same thing. Amara stepped inside. I need your help, she said. Marcus froze slightly. That doesn't sound casual. It's not. He stood up slowly. What kind of help? Amara held his gaze. The kind where you don't ask too many questions. A pause. Marcus let out a small breath. Okay. That's exactly the kind that makes me want to ask questions. Amara stepped closer. Do you trust me? That landed. Marcus didn't answer immediately, but his expression said everything. Yes, he said finally. Amara nodded once. Then I need you to do something for me tonight. Marcus swallowed. What? She lowered her voice. I need access to the presentation system. His eyes widened. That's restricted. I know. And monitored. I know. Marcus shook his head slightly. Amara, what are you doing? She didn't answer directly. Have you ever wondered where the money actually goes? She asked instead. Marcus froze. Because now, he understood. This is bigger than I thought, isn't it? He said quietly. Amara didn't look away. Yes. Another pause. Is it dangerous? He asked. Amara took a breath. Yes. Marcus looked down for a moment. Thinking. Processing. Then he looked back up. What do you need me to do? That night, the gala began exactly as expected. Elegant. Controlled. Perfect. Guests filled the grand hall. Soft music played. Cameras flashed. Laughter. Conversation. Confidence. Everything looked flawless. Amara stood near the back. Watching. Not the crowd. The stage. Victor stood at the center. Speaking. And it is because of your generosity, he said smoothly, that we continue to change lives. Applause. Loud. Unquestioning. Amara's eyes moved slightly. Marcus stood near the control booth. Nervous. Waiting. Amara gave the smallest nod. Marcus hesitated. Then, moved. On stage. Victor continued. Transparency, integrity, and commitment. These are the values that define us. Then suddenly, the screen behind him flickered. A small glitch. Barely noticeable. Victor paused for half a second. Then continued. And together we. The screen changed. Not slides. Not numbers. Records. Raw data. Transactions. Unfiltered. The room shifted. At first, confusion. Then silence. Victor turned slowly. His expression changed. Not dramatically, but enough. Turn that off, he said quietly. But it was too late. Because the truth was already visible. And for the first time, Victor Hale didn't look in control. He looked exposed. From the back of the room, Amara watched. Still, calm. Because this was only the beginning. The first crack. And once cracks appear, it's only a matter of time before everything falls apart. The screen didn't just change. It took over. At first, no one moved. Because no one understood what they were looking at. Lines of numbers. Transfers. Account names. Dates. Amounts. Not polished. Not presented. Not explained. Just raw. Is this part of the presentation? Someone whispered from the front row. Another voice answered quietly. I don't think so. Victor stood still on stage. For a moment, he didn't turn around. As if By not looking, he could pretend it wasn't happening. But the room had already shifted. The applause was gone. The smiles were gone. The confidence, gone. Victor turned slowly. His eyes scanned the screen. Recognition came first. Then calculation. Then something much quieter. Fear. But only for a second. Because Victor Hale didn't panic. He adjusted. He stepped forward slightly. Lifted the microphone again. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said smoothly, with just enough calm to steady the room. "It seems there's been a technical error." A few nervous chuckles followed. Relief tried to settle in. Because people wanted it to be a mistake. Victor gestured lightly toward the screen. "These are internal reconciliation logs. Incomplete data, taken out of context." He smiled. Controlled. Familiar. "I assure you, everything you're seeing here has already been accounted for and audited." That word, audited, it carried weight, authority, and for a brief moment, it worked. You could feel it. People nodding, whispering, convincing themselves. But then, the screen changed again. Not numbers this time. Audio. A waveform appeared. Then, Victor's voice. "The transfers are clean." The room froze. The recording continued. No irregular flags. None that matter. The silence that followed was different now. Heavier. Unavoidable. Victor didn't move this time. He couldn't. Because this wasn't data. This was him. Unfiltered. Unexplained. Unprotected. The older man's voice followed. And the foundation? Victor again. Untouchable. A gasp somewhere in the crowd. A chair shifted loudly. Someone stood up. "What is this?" Victor stepped forward quickly now. "Turn it off," he snapped. This time, no calm, no polish. But the system didn't respond. Because he wasn't in control of it. At the back of the room, Amara didn't move. Her eyes stayed on the stage. Not watching the screen anymore. Watching him. Because this moment, this exact moment, was the one she had built everything for. Marcus stood frozen near the control booth. His hands slightly shaking. "This wasn't all you told me," he whispered to himself. Because this wasn't just exposure. This was detonation. On stage, Lena stepped forward. "Everyone, please remain calm. This is clearly manipulated." Her voice cut sharply through the room. But it lacked something. Certainty. Daniel moved toward the side of the stage, already pulling out his phone. "Shut the system down," he muttered urgently. "It's not responding," someone replied. The recording continued. "Make sure she stays that way." Of course. Every word landed heavier than the last. Because now, there was no explanation left. Victor lowered the microphone slowly. His eyes scanned the crowd. But this time, he wasn't controlling them. He was measuring damage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said again, quieter now. "This is clearly a targeted attack." But no one clapped this time. No one nodded. No one believed. Because belief had already started to shift. Near the front, a woman stood up. "I donated $500,000 to this foundation." Her voice shook slightly. "Are you telling me this is fake?" Victor opened his mouth. But no words came immediately. Because for the first time, he didn't have the room. "I will personally ensure," he started. "Answer the question," she interrupted. The room leaned into that moment. Victor's silence stretched. Too long. And silence can be louder than anything. At the back, Amara finally moved. One step forward, then another. Not rushing, not dramatic, just deliberate. People began to notice. Heads turned. Whispers followed. "Is that? Isn't she?" Amara walked forward until she reached the center aisle. Then stopped. Victor saw her. And everything clicked. Not fully, but enough. "You," he said quietly. Amara didn't raise her voice. Didn't step onto the stage. Didn't need to. "You said it was untouchable," she said. Her voice carried anyway. Because the room was listening now. Victor's jaw tightened. "You have no idea what you're doing," he replied. Amara tilted her head slightly. "No," she said calmly. "I know exactly what I'm doing." A pause. Then she added, "I'm finishing what you thought no one would ever start." The room held its breath. Victor stepped down from the stage. Slowly, deliberately, until he stood just a few feet from her. "This doesn't end the way you think it does," he said quietly. Amara met his gaze. "It already has." Another pause. Then, sirens. Distant at first, then closer. The sound cut through everything. Victor didn't turn, but his expression shifted. Not fear, not panic, something else. Realization. You called them, he said. Amara didn't answer. She didn't need to, because the truth wasn't just in the room anymore. It was outside, on its way, and for the first time, Victor Hale wasn't calculating his next move. He was running out of them. The doors at the back opened. Uniformed officers stepped inside. The room parted instantly. No one spoke. No one moved. Because now, this wasn't a story anymore. It was real. And reality doesn't negotiate. As the officers approached the stage, Amara finally exhaled slowly. Not relief. Not victory. Just release. Because everything she had carried, everything she had uncovered, everything she had risked, had finally reached the surface. And once truth reaches the surface, there's no putting it back. Not now. Not ever. The room didn't erupt. It didn't descend into chaos. It didn't explode the way people imagine moments like this should. Instead, it went quiet. Not confused. Not uncertain. But heavy. Because everyone in that room understood something at the same time. This wasn't a scandal anymore. It was the end of something they believed in. The officers moved forward with calm precision. No shouting. No rushing. Just certainty. Victor Hale, one of them said firmly, "You need to come with us." Victor didn't resist. He didn't argue. He didn't even look surprised. He just stood there for a moment. Still, as if calculating something one last time. Then slowly, he turned his head and looked at Amara. Not angry. Not pleading. Just searching. "You could have walked away," he said quietly. The room was silent enough that everyone heard it. Amara didn't move. "You're right," she replied. A small pause. "I could have." Victor studied her face, as if trying to understand something he hadn't seen before. "Why didn't you?" he asked. Amara's answer came without hesitation. "Because someone has to stop people like you." A faint smile touched Victor's lips. Not amusement. Recognition. "You think this is about me?" he said softly. Amara didn't respond immediately. Victor took a small step closer, even with officers beside him. Even now, he still tried to hold control of the moment. "This doesn't end with me," he said. And for the first time, there was truth in his voice. Amara held his gaze. "I know." That answer shifted something. Because she wasn't naive. She understood exactly what this was. A system, not just a man. Victor's expression changed slightly. "Then you understand what happens next," he said. Amara nodded once. "Yes," she said. Another pause. "Everything comes out." The officers stepped in. "Firm now? No more space for conversation." "Sir," one of them said. Victor didn't resist. He allowed them to take his arm. But as they turned him toward the exit, he spoke again. "They'll rebuild it," he said quietly. Amara didn't respond. "They always do." And then, he was gone. Lena stood frozen near the stage. Her composure, gone. Her confidence, gone. Daniel had already stepped back. Distance. Silence. Self-preservation. The room began to shift again. But this time, not with confusion. With reaction. Voices rose. "Is this real? How long has this been happening? Where did the money go?" Questions filled the space Victor had left behind. Because once truth breaks through, it doesn't stop. Amara stood still, watching it unfold. Not stepping in. Not controlling it. Because this part was no longer hers. The truth had taken over. Marcus approached slowly. His face pale. Eyes wide. "You," he said quietly. Then stopped. Because he didn't know how to finish that sentence. Amara looked at him. "You helped," she said. Marcus shook his head slightly. "I didn't know it was this big." Amara nodded. "Neither did I." A pause. "Are we okay?" he asked carefully. Amara studied him for a moment, then gave a small, genuine nod. "We are." That was enough. Hours later, the building was almost empty. Media trucks lined the street outside. Lights flashing. Voices shouting. But inside, it was quiet again. Amara walked slowly through the hallway. The same hallway she had walked every day. But it felt different now. Not because the building had changed, but because the illusion had. She stopped briefly outside Victor's office. The door was open. Empty. For a moment. She just looked. Then she stepped inside. The room was exactly as he left it. Perfect. Organized. Controlled. Except now, it meant nothing. Amara walked over to the desk, placed her hand lightly on it. "This was never yours," she said quietly. "Because power built on lies is never owned. It's borrowed. And eventually, it gets taken back." Later that night, Amara stepped outside. The cool air hit her face. She took a slow breath. For the first time in days, everything was still. No questions. No movement. No pressure. Just silence. Marcus joined her a few moments later. "They're saying this is going national," he said. Amara nodded slightly. "It should." Another pause. "What happens now?" he asked. Amara looked out at the city, lights stretching into the distance. "The system gets investigated," she said. "People get exposed. Things change." Marcus let out a small breath. "You sound very sure." Amara turned slightly. "I'm not," she said honestly. A pause. "But I know one thing." "What's that?" Amara's voice softened slightly. "They won't be invisible anymore." The sirens were gone now. The noise had faded. But the impact was just beginning. Because stories like this don't end when someone gets arrested. They end when people stop looking away. Amara stood there for a long moment. Then finally, she turned and walked away, not as a hero, not as a victim, but as someone who refused to stay silent. And in a world built on quiet corruption, that was the most dangerous thing she could be. Narrator, closing tone. They called him untouchable. They built a system no one questioned. They hid behind trust, power, and silence. But all it took was one person who refused to look away. Because in the end, karma doesn't rush. It doesn't warn. It doesn't ask for permission. It waits. And when it arrives, it doesn't just expose the truth. It destroys everything built to hide it. The end. Thank you for staying until the end. Stories like this remind us of something important, that the truth doesn't always show up immediately. But when it does, it changes everything. Some people believe they can hide behind power, influence, and silence. But sooner or later, karma finds a way to bring everything to light. If this story moved you, let me know in the comments. Do you think justice always wins, or do some people get away forever? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves powerful stories like this. And if you're ready for another unforgettable story, check out the next video on your screen, because the next story might be even more shocking than this one.